Our involvement in replenishing California's groundwater supplies began over 10 years ago through a collaboration with a farmer in Fresno County, Don Cameron, who was testing an idea, a really new idea of capturing peak flood flows on his farmland to recharge his groundwater supply. Phil Bachand of Bachand and Associates documented the feasibility of this approach to recharging floodwater on farmland, and we've been helping ever since to promote this concept, test it, and demonstrate it throughout the Central Valley. We've worked with the Almond Board of California to ensure that application of excess water won't harm the crop. We've evaluated the risks to groundwater quality of recharging on farmland with different histories of fertilizer application. Next slide, Hannah. We developed a groundwater recharge assessment tool with our partners at the Earth Genome to support irrigation districts decide where, when, and how much water they could recharge on thousands of privately owned acres of fields in their district service area. And most recently, we've been working with the California Department of Water Resources to integrate our groundwater recharge assessment tool into their flood forecasting of climate change models to determine how much of those flood peaks could actually be diverted off rivers and onto farmland to reduce flooding, and at the same time replenish depleted groundwater supplies. We've also been looking at how recharge can benefit community drinking water wells, as well as environmental conditions along waterways and floodplains. All of Sustainable Conservation's programs advance water problem solving in California, which is why our three-part fall webinar series, our Watershed Moment, will explore how we can both bolster resilience and ensure clean drinking water for communities, sufficient flows in rivers for fish and wildlife, and reliable irrigation supplies for farming. I'm very excited to kick off this series today with all of you. But before we get started, we'd like to get to know our audience, and we have 3 poll questions for you. So if you could please answer this, and notice you may need to drag the cursor down on the right-hand side to get to your location where you're joining us from today. If you can go ahead and click on those. Curious what parts of the state you represent. And if you are in Southern California, you do need to drag it down further. Good. We've got 93 people on the call, or 89 people on the call besides the panelists. And it looks like we have a high number of you coming in from San Joaquin Valley is our greatest percentage, but really a pretty good distribution from the Bay Area and Sacramento Valley, San Joaquin Valley, but also some representation from Southern California, Sierra Nevada. Great. And Hannah, can they all see the results here?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good. So it's great to have you all from various places around the state. Our second question for you is, what best describes your affiliation? What sort of organization do you represent? And or sort of student or tribes, or if you're donors, perhaps from foundation or philanthropy, you could select that. Is that poll now going? Hannah, can you tell if that poll is now operating? I'm not seeing it.
Yes, all 3 questions have been answered, Daniel, if you scroll down.
Okay, great. Great, okay. So it looks like we have high turnout from government and nonprofits, as well as some water agencies, agriculture, academia. Again, great to see you all here, as well as some folks from students and tribes. And then in terms of knowledge, it looks like we've got an average level of knowledge. So our panelists and I will try and make sure we describe some of the acronyms that we use so that those of you that are more beginner can follow along. And those of you that are experts, we of course look forward to your questions that you may challenge us with. So I think with that, and seeing where everyone's from, we'll go ahead and I'd like to introduce the panelists. And they represent the 3 major sectors that sustainable conservation works with. to advance groundwater recharge. And if you folks can bring your cameras on, that'd be great. We have representation from agriculture, local water districts, as well as state agencies. First, I'll introduce Christine Gemperle. Christine and her brother Eric grow almonds on 135 acres on 2 ranches that make up the Gemperle Orchards near Ceres. They're just south of Modesto. And Christine brings great background in biology, as well as a master's degree in fisheries biology. And but the call of farming has really kept her involved in the farm, but with excellent other experiences and backgrounds. She also serves on the Almond Board of California, an organization that Sustainable Conservation has partnered with for many years. Next, we have Erin Fukuda, and Erin is a general manager at the Tulare Irrigation District and wears a second hat of serving as the interim general manager at the Mid-Cahuilla Groundwater Sustainability Agency. And Erin has a degree in civil engineering, as well as a master's in public administration. As you'll hear, he's been a leader in advancing innovative incentives for groundwater recharge and was a founding partner in developing the groundwater recharge assessment tool with Sustainable Conservation. And then our third panelist is Jenny Marr, supervising engineer at the California Department of Water Resources. She's been a leading voice in advancing the department's Flood Managed Aquifer Recharge Initiative, or FloodMAR. And no, the program was not named after her, but though it's a fitting job given her name. She's been supportive of Sustainable Conservation's work for years to demonstrate and document recharge on the ground, and has helped us document and produce some guidance for growers and districts. So we're going to kick off our panel here, and I'm delighted to have the 3 of you together. Been wonderful working with all 3 of you. Recharge has been practiced in a variety of different ways around the state to achieve different outcomes. And so just to start orienting us to our audience to what you all are doing, can you start out by describing, maybe Christine first, why you're practicing or promoting recharge and how you're actually doing that? What's the methods that you're using?
Well, one of the reasons I'm promoting it is actually for my community, whether that's my agricultural community around me, and I'm included in that to keep our aquifer healthy, but also for my neighbor whose well went dry during the last drought. And I think about, her hardship and think like somebody like me who has a well right next to her might not be that far behind. So how we do it is we have an orchard, and during the winter we put up levees. We're right on the canal. And so we open our gate to the canal and the water comes in through our open pipeline. And I'm able to flood section by section of the orchard. And usually it takes anywhere from 16 to 20 hours to do the whole place. And it could be about 15 acre feet that we put on in a single flood irrigation.
Great. And what outcomes have you seen or documented as a result of doing that, especially this past winter?
Well, a couple cool things that we've measured. One of the things is by looking at the soil samples, we've seen that our salt levels have gone down, and it's really easy to accumulate salts in your soils during a drought. Another thing we measured is how much water we put on. We put on 44 acre feet of water during the flood MAR, and that was almost twice as much as we took out pumping groundwater during the drought. So I'm feeling like pretty good about, the net positive there.
Yeah.
No bad impacts on the trees whatsoever. They look great this year.
That's great. Okay, that's great. And Erin, let's from an irrigation district perspective, why are you promoting and practice and advancing recharge in your district?
Well, as the irrigation district and the GSA representative, our biggest focus right now is on the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or what we call SGMA, and that's bringing our groundwater levels into sustainability within the next 20 years. But recognizing that 20 years is, you really don't have that glide path. You really got to get to sustainability now, meaning you got to capture those wet years. And so as an irrigation district, we have a long history of being a conjunctive use irrigation district where we use surface water and then do groundwater recharge activities. And Sigma has just made it such that we can now step that game up and really enhance what we've already been doing and taking it to the next level. And so our traditional methods of groundwater recharge include losses in our canals. That's one of our major recharge systems. Our earthen non-line canals. We have 300 miles, and that's a recharge in itself. We have access to 1,300 acres of recharge basins. And then now, you know, the common practice is on-farm recharge, or what we just simply call winter irrigation. And I do have some results I'd like to show folks and share just really quickly to run through here.
Great.
Hope everybody can see that. Our program really has rallied around, or began about 2 years ago with the implementation of an emergency ordinance in response to the drought. So with declining groundwater levels, we implemented an allocation and groundwater cutback program. So we were trying to manage reductions or scarcity with the program. What we didn't realize that the tool that we developed to track it all, our water dashboard, became an incentive tool that instantaneously moved growers into a recharge mode. And it was just a happy end product of a lot of hard work during the establishment of the program. So our year this year started out with full basins, and this is 3 recent basins we built in the last 10 to 12 years. We added about 225 acres of recharge basins in the last 10 years. They all were full, and they're specifically targeted in areas where we have low groundwater levels, or we're trying to recharge a disadvantaged community. We did our winter irrigation, which, you know, some call on-farm recharge, and everybody was asking me for pictures and how does this all work? So I send them these pictures and they go, well, that's just a field with water. I mean, it just looks like irrigation to them. And that's what it was. Interestingly, the picture in the furrows, we have found that is the most effective way to get the most volume into the ground. And so you set siphon pipes and you go down the field and back up the field. What we're getting numbers in now, just so these are data hot off the press last week, so they haven't been fully vetted yet, but felt it's important to start getting numbers out there, what we can do. So this period of time from 1915 to 2023, highest diversion rate, that's not recharge, diversions into the district, but either that went to crop demand or recharge. We diverted 414,000 acre feet, so greater than 1983. Of that, this is the impressive part, the largest diversion to grower turnout, 189,000 acre feet to the turnouts to the growers. So a large portion, we put some groundwater in and then growers took it and added more to that. Highest diversion rate ever to the turnouts. And then what we're seeing is groundwater levels increasing quite a bit, 20 to 30 feet in certain areas. So it's working. And what we like to say is we used to have only one recharge agent in Tulare ID, and that was Tulare ID. And now we have 201. So when we say time to recharge, you have 200 clients out there doing it all at once. And so during the flood period, we did not go out of banks on any one of our canals or streams. We basically let it out through all of our turnouts and into the fields.
That's great, Aaron. And just in contrast, I just saw article in the San Francisco Chronicle this morning saying that basically based on a report from the Department of Water Resources saying that overall the Tulare Basin groundwater levels had not recovered this year, but there within your district, we see significant improvement. So that's great. Jenny, why don't we take it over to you, representing the Department of Water Resources, and what role and why has the department been promoting recharge, and what have you been able to document this year?
Yeah. Thanks, Daniel. I think you've heard from Christine and Aaron that, in the context of climate change and multi-year droughts and Sigma, Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, we don't really have a choice. I think everyone would agree, to have that sustainable and resilient water future in California as water managers, as water stewards, we don't have a choice but to increase and promote recharge. And we have overdrafted basins throughout the state. Addressing those are going to require a mix of reducing demand and increasing recharge. And increasing recharge is obviously a more popular solution, and it's broadly supported. And so, really, in addition to responding to current conditions, we're faced with climate vulnerability, and all water sectors are vulnerable to climate change. And multi-benefit groundwater recharge is an excellent adaptation to climate change, and being able to manage these swings from wet periods to dry periods and achieve multiple benefits, reducing flood risk and responding to increases in agricultural water demand from higher temperatures or just higher ambient arid conditions, addressing overdrafted groundwater basins, increasing depths of groundwater for groundwater dependent ecosystems, and just having those reduced pumping costs. So really, the department's thoughts is that multi-benefit recharge is not a nice to have, it's a must have in a groundwater manager's toolkit. And when we're working on our FloodMAR program, which is really, how do we harness flood flows, high flows during or in anticipation of events and get that water out on ag lands, on managed natural lands, on open space, and really kind of tailoring projects to the location. And depending on where you recharge, you might get water supply reliability benefits like Christine and Aaron have talked about, and the flood risk reduction, drought preparedness, ecosystem enhancement, just aquifer replenishment in itself, working landscape preservation, water quality. There's really lots of opportunity when you look at FloodMAR projects at different scales of what kind of benefits you can achieve. And it's really a powerful tool in our arsenal because it can be implemented at multiple scales. And Christine and Aaron are excellent examples of that FloodMAR can be implemented from an individual grower diverting water onto their fields using existing infrastructure. Very simple operation, but very powerful in some of the benefits that you can see locally. And you can also do FloodMAR at a district or regional watershed scale, where you're getting really significant benefits from using infrastructure throughout the district or watershed, reoperating reservoirs, having lots of potential for recharge basins or inline or in conveyance recharge, which Aaron already mentioned. So there's lots of great opportunity and lots of multi-benefit options for formulating FloodMAR.
I mean, Jenny, as you've articulated it, there's this sort of evolving sense of all the possible benefits. Aaron, maybe just to give folks a little bit more of a sense, I mean, your district has been doing recharge for decades in those recharge basins, but how has it been evolving in terms of these other benefits, and especially this year when we saw so much water and these flooding issues, including the newly forming of the Tulare Lake. What sort of benefits have you been seeing possible this year? What are some of the things you've learned?
I think the first and foremost is the flood risk reduction that comes along with the recharge. So again, when we were getting notices that the Kauai Terminus Dam might overtop and we needed to take as much water as we could, the growers responded, and we basically, if you imagine we have, about 500 turnouts, and you open half of them with alfalfa valves and field valves opened up, it basically just became one big open sponge instead of heading to the lake bottom. And again, so you get some flood reduction. I think we're seeing the groundwater levels come up. There's some odd things that I noticed around the area too. Our air quality to me seems better because I think there's less dust. I think we're seeing hopefully we're going to go out and do some water quality sampling, and our hope is that we see some water quality benefits by adding that sheer volume of water to the system. And then I think there's some social benefits that I think come along that we can't measure, we can't see, we can't really put our fingers on, but I like to say that, water is like a new mood. And so when we're in drought, everybody's grumpy, everybody's tired, everybody's upset. And now that we just had a wet year, everybody is happy. Our communities are moving along. Everybody just feels better with water around you. And our ecosystem woke up, right? We have more birds. You can hear the frogs again. They're just around the neighborhood. You see the habitat wake up, I think.
Yeah, I was just driving through Kern County on Sunday, driving home from the mountains, and saw just extensive flocks of egrets and ibises out in some of the recharge ponds in that area. And at this time of year, it's been really hard for these migrating water wading birds to find habitat in the Central Valley, which used to be, a vast stopover point in their flyway. And having all these ponds and fields loaded up just really increases that migratory habitat opportunity too.
Yeah, they're basically getting buffet lunch right now. Our basins are primed, and it's funny you say that because we recognize that. I forgot to mention that we went into a fall recharge mode, which is not customary. So that means those recharge basins usually go off in the summertime and don't come back on. They came back online, and so they're filled with fish and stuff. And so the one behind my office is filled with birds right now. So
yeah, right.
Yeah. The extra benefit of food production, of having water at the right time of year for fall for migratory birds. And I just wanted to, note when you mentioned air quality improvements, that dust suppression, one of the things that I've noticed about recharge projects is that you're not always getting the outcomes that you expected at the outset. You might have planned a project and thought, I'm just doing recharge because it's good for the basin. And, other observations like air quality improvements, that's the first I've heard that. That's amazing. But, weed suppression, not having to apply as many herbicides and other things in the field, or just soil health and other things that come along of just getting water out on the landscape, spreading it out, slowing it down, and sinking it into the ground. Really, you see a lot of benefits. You might think it's single purpose. I'm just going to recharge. But you see a lot of benefits in observation and doing.
Christine, you've done a lot of different soil health practices on your land with cover crops and trying to improve the soil health. And you mentioned the salts have been reduced. How did recharging in an almond orchard affect your cover crops and some of your other practices that are, trying to achieve other outcomes?
Well, my cover crops loved all the water. I mean, they were as tall as I was, at least the mustard was. And they helped the water infiltrate, as well. The other cool thing is because I actually have designated pollinator habitat where I have milkweed for monarchs and stuff, that was like totally alive and vibrant all summer long, because I continued to use that area with my, what do they call it? The flushing water, that you use in your tanks, your micro sprinkler tanks. It comes out and it flushes it. And I always send that to my recharge area. And I even had monarchs this summer, like quite a few of them. And that's something I've never seen in the past. So I think, like Aaron said, like the environment, the ecosystem has come back alive.
Right. So, we've been talking about all these multiple benefits, but really a year ago, we would have talked about multiple challenges. All of these things could be framed as problems for the state, the drought, the depleted groundwater supply, the uncertain surface water deliveries, poor water quality for rural communities. How are you all looking at this? And I'll start with Aaron. How do your recharge activities or programs, how do you frame them in terms of these wet year, dry year periods? Because everything looks great now, but the next drought we have, how will you frame this approach and what you've been doing in this very, very wet year?
We call it the making decisions before you have to make decisions concept, is that you're trying to bridge the good times to help you in the bad times, right? So as a conjunctive use irrigation district, you're trying to always balance that when your needs are going to come up. And so in a wet year, you're trying to put water in the bank, in the ground to have during dry years. So again, the challenge is you've got floods coming your way. Well, take that challenge and utilize it to your advantage and put those flood flows into the ground, reducing damages to your communities and your homes and your businesses, and turn it into an asset as a groundwater supply in the future. And what we're, as we talked with sustainable conservation and others, the other challenges that come with that include, water quality aspects that we're still evaluating. We are, carefully watching that. There could be potential there, but in volume, you may be doing a beneficial thing to the aquifer and diluting the nitrates and other things. And then, the last thing is you're trying to take the challenge of a drought cycle. And again, like I said, taking the flood, and you're just basically creating an aquifer bank account of water supplies that you can utilize in the future. And our allocation system recognizes that. For instance, we actually, in this year's allocation, we reduced our allocation to our growers by 1.5 acre feet per acre. So we didn't go up, we went down, because now that the groundwater levels are up, we need to be more protective, more cautious, and more judicious in our allocations. So those are how we're balancing the challenges.
Just to help define, when you talk about allocations for the layperson, this is pumping,
Right.
basically.
Well, it's in our territory, it's groundwater pumping measured as evapotranspiration through satellite imagery that can track the evaporation and transpiration of water out of the system. And so we're allocating, we started out at 2.5 acre feet per acre of evapotranspiration, and we're now down to 1 acre foot per acre of evapotranspiration, plus their credits, plus precipitation, plus native yield. So a lot of other categories, very complicated, but essentially our allocations are going down.
Christine mentioned, that she recharged basically twice the amount that she uses in a year.
Oh, yeah, twice the amount, yeah.
That you use in a year. Aaron, just to give people reference in your area, when you talk about 1.5 feet, what's that relative to their crops demand?
Yeah, so average crop in Tulare Irrigation District is using 3 to 3.5 acre feet per acre. So we're allocating less than they can get to get a crop off the ground. So it's incumbent upon them to somehow recharge or other programs to make up that difference. And I would say the fear we had initially was, revolt. I was asked recently at a panel discussion, what's the most beneficial thing you experienced so far? I'm alive and I'm still employed because the things that we put in place were not popular or sought after. But I think what we've proven is when you sit down and do the hard work and get people to understand the landscape, the issues, and really buy into the program, you not only get participation, you got what we got. They turned the tool into an incentive on their own and really put a lot of water into the ground this year.
One of the things that we've seen this year across the state is that districts that were ready and had programs and incentives like you have, Aaron, were able to take really large gulps of this big supply of water. And those that weren't, didn't have those programs in place. Christine, can you talk a little bit about in your district, how did you come to have access to the water, and why did you take it this year, and how many of your neighbors have taken it?
Well, when the rain started in January, my piece of property is right on one of the main canals. And I looked over and I was like, wow, there's a ton of water going down the canal. I wonder if I can just open my gate and take some. So I contacted the main person over at Turlock Irrigation District. She's like, wait a second, we have a pilot program going on. Let me get you in it as one of our growers. And so there were only about 3 people in it because it was a pilot program. So they set me up real quick and put up all the telemetry for monitoring how much water was going on the property. And then I was allowed to open up my gate and get going. And what was the second part of the question?
How did your neighbors react? What was their thoughts?
Oh, I think a lot of neighbors were like, how'd you get the water? People were, and I think some people probably driving by, knowing that we had just gotten like 5 inches of rain, a lot of rain. They were probably like, is she crazy? But then, of course, there was a lot of publicity on it, and I'm sure they figured out what was going on. Like, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense.
I have a funny story to add on to Christine's. We had a grower that called me very concerned because he was doing all this recharge and his neighbor wasn't. So he's like, why is my neighbor not doing it? Because I'm just putting it in the ground for him to take out later on, right? And I said, yeah, maybe. Well, the next day that neighbor called and he said, hey, my neighbor's taking all this water. What's that all about? I said, well, you can order it and it goes on your water dashboard. He goes, that's great. I'm calling in a water order. So that afternoon, he ends up being our largest landowner in our irrigation district. And when he irrigates with massive pumps. He fired up every pump he had and basically put out so much water. He overtopped his borders. He overtopped everything, flooded the shoulders of the road. But it was funny because all the neighbors, they were just all laughing and having a good time with it. Like I said, it became a kind of a communal, like, let's get at it, right? Let's do it. Let's, and everybody bought into it at that point. And so, like Christine said, it's kind of like that. I want to be a part of the cool kids. Well, the new cool kids now have recharge projects or some sort of recharge activity going on. And so I'm hoping it kind of ignites the state and the other growers across the landscape to probably get their fields prepped and ready to go. Because I'm hoping there's another wet year, but we don't know.
Great. And we're getting lots of questions in the chat, which we'll definitely come to. I just want to let everybody know that. I'm going to ask one of the questions that's really related to Aaron, what you just said a minute ago about the flood control benefits of taking the water off. And Sebastian was asking, how was the volume of that diversion tracked? And were you buying that water? And what are the water rights implications of your example this year with the winter diversions?
So luckily, the irrigation district does have two water supplies, both under existing pre-1914 water rights or a Bureau reclamation contract on the San Joaquin River. So as far as accessing things like the executive order that the governor put out for flows, we did not have to access that. And again, the beneficial use of the water is defined by the end use, which is for agricultural purposes. They get it on their water dashboard. They're going to pump it out for agriculture. So we didn't necessarily run into any hoops. Again, we are a conjunctive use irrigation district. We would design that way. We've operated that way. From the measurement perspective, again, our district, we're a Bureau reclamation contractor. We measure every turnout. So we don't have a physical meter on everything. Whatever doesn't have a meter has a orifice plate calculation that gets read twice a day. And what we found is if you read those over a long period of time, they actually, the overs and unders cancel themselves out. So there's measurement on everything. And then our system is measured at key locations for diversion points.
Great, thank you. I want to go back to the multi-benefit picture again on this. Multi-benefit water management, as you heard Jenny talking about, really requires integrated thinking as well as coordinated actions that often involve thinking outside of our traditional water management boxes around what an agency's jurisdiction is that they were established for. An irrigation district was established for irrigation purposes, not for recharge purposes. We have regulations regarding water quality and the water that's applied on land and what kind of quality that can have in terms of drinking water. We've got different disciplines, engineering or agronomic disciplines, and then experience and knowledge as well as business interests. And integrating all of that is going to be so essential to seeing these efforts that each of you demonstrate go further. So I just want to ask, I'll start with Christine, sort of at the farm level. What do you think it's going to take to see a multi-benefit approach be more widely promoted within your district amongst growers? And you've demonstrated it, but what's next?
Well, I think we have to change the way we think about recharge as farmers. I think and at some level there might be well, if I'm going to do all this work, what am I going to get for it? And I think we kind of have to get away from what am I going to get from it and look at it sort of like there's three beneficiaries here. There's you as the farmer, there's your community all around you, and then there's the environment. And the thing is, if you benefit the community and the environment, that comes back to you. So, and And then, yes, there should be fair compensation to, for the work that you've put in and the efforts you made for the benefit of the community and the ecosystem. But I think that's how we have to look at it now. That's how I look at it.
Yeah.
So, but people have to understand that it will come back to them in the way things are regulated, right? And the way things are distributed. If we all do our fair share.
Yeah, that's a real shift. Do you see that kind of thinking in the district? What's going to take to share that perspective? Is it more demonstrations like your own?
Education. I think education as well. I think actually really understanding like what we're facing as we get closer to SGMA going into place, which is the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, because that is going to have a big impact. And also really educating people on like, we're going to be going through these climate change, feast and famine stages a lot. And by doing this, the stress either on our crops or on ourselves that we deal with during these feast and famines, maybe that we just sort of kind of stay somewhere like kind of relaxed in the middle because we've given ourselves cushion on either end.
And Daniel, can I add to Christine's
Sure.
Education component? Because we've heard from a lot of growers that like grower to grower coordination and seeing what your neighbor's doing really helps that snowball effect. Flood mar and recharge requires a lot of land area. And so we need that snowball effect to bring multi-benefit recharge to scale. And I just wanted to share with the community that is viewing today that DWR and Sustainable Conservation worked together on grower guidance documents, how to do on-farm recharge. And as part of that, there's about a dozen grower case studies that really articulate the grower's experience from their perspective, what their motivations were, what they saw and observed as being part of the recharge. And Christine was one of those case studies. So want to highlight that information is available and really can help support that education component.
And just understanding like the benefits to your farm and your soils and whatever it is you're growing. I think that will probably be the thing that probably goes the furthest in encouraging people. Like overall, it's going to be a net benefit to your growing operation.
And Christine, you operate in a district that doesn't yet have, or maybe who knows if they're going to have the incentives that Aaron described. So you're saying that there's enough benefit directly to you as a farmer that's enough to get started. And
yeah, I mean, knowing
incentives as well.
Yeah, one of the big incentives was knowing that my groundwater levels went up. So, and it's probably better quality groundwater the more that I put in there, right?
Yeah.
So if I do have to pull on that during the next drought, I feel like very confident if I can keep doing groundwater recharge that I'm keeping it at a healthy level and a healthy quality.
And have you actually been able to detect an improvement in the groundwater level, either for your ag pump or for your neighbor's domestic well?
Yes. So my neighbor's well, it actually went up to the point where she could use it again, although it's old and she still needs to work on it. But our levels did go up. And let's see. I'm sorry, what was the second part of that question?
Her well or your ag wells?
Oh, my ag wells, yes. Because TID measured them. They actually measured them before and after.
Great. Yeah. Aaron, how about we talked about your district, how much you recharge. How about the response in the groundwater?
Yeah, we're seeing groundwater levels already 2 months ago come up 20, 30 feet. So, but in relation to the multi-benefit, I mean, most people think of or conceptualize the habitat / recharge basin type concept, which I think to get that, I think we're going to start seeing those projects pop up. I believe with Christine too, it's when you start seeing what growers can do. I mean, growers are really good stewards of the land and the plants. And even in these habitat projects, I've seen personally, you don't want me growing your habitat. It'll be the wrong habitat. It's just going to be weeds. So farmers inherently are the people you're going to need to get those projects off the ground. But there's another host of multi-benefit projects, which I think are out there that may be district level or growers, like in my case, a grower sold his land to us to help a disadvantaged community and put a recharge basin there. So I believe that you're beginning to see projects come out on the landscape, and people then can then evaluate whether that's going to fit for them. So we need a lot of just folks out there willing to go out on a limb, take the risks, start putting these in place, because again, I do believe you only have 4 years to solve your groundwater sustainability. And that means you've got to be prepared for the 4 wet years. And I think we already missed 2 of them. We had 2 of them already, 2019 and 2023. So we have 2 left. So for folks out there that want to get started, don't wait. Now you need to get started now.
So broadly then, what needs to change to allow or incentivize more farmers, districts, and agencies to promote or implement recharge at a bigger scale? I mean, you all are great examples of solutions. What do you think is needed to see this more widely adopted?
You know, oh, go ahead, Christine.
I was just going to start with one simple thing at the grower level, because flood irrigation is one of the best ways to do it. And because so many people have moved to micro sprinklers or drip and not really been using their flood irrigation system, it would be nice to have some incentives to help maintain those systems if we are going to be doing this for a community benefit. So some sort of grants for repairing or maintaining of the systems.
Christine, those flood systems were criticized over the past dry years as being wasteful of water. Can you talk a little bit about how the general public should think about when they see what they should think when they see water being flooded on a field? What does it mean? Is it wasteful or is it beneficial?
Well, it's a tool is what it is. So we have all sorts of tools in our tool chest, and sometimes they're appropriate to use and sometimes they're not appropriate to use. And so flood irrigation during a wet year is a great tool for getting a lot of water down in the ground very quickly. And I think that's how we have to start thinking about these things. Like, it really matters when you use them.
So when you talk about an incentive for flood irrigation, you're not saying in place of the micro sprinkler systems. It's a dual system that you're talking about.
Yes, it's good to have several systems so you can pivot and adjust with everything that climate change is going to throw at us.
Yeah, great. Erin, what about you? What do you think is needed to allow or to incentivize either, I don't know if you're trying to get more farmers in your district to participate still, or if not that, then what do we need for the other districts in the area that didn't see groundwater improvement the same way you did?
Yeah, I think that the folks need to start understanding the landscape and better realizing that time is not on their side, right? And every wet year that goes by that they aren't maximized, the chances get slimmer and slimmer that they do get to a sustainability window that has agriculture in your community at its full maximum economic and social output, right? So if you wait too long, every year you miss, that's another 2 to 3 years of production that you may lay on the table. And I think that there needs to start, growers need to start coming to the table, the leaders like Christine that, have these willingness and the energy to go out there and get this all done. I think growers that are trying to avoid it and think that they can wait another year or 2 years, or maybe I've literally heard people that say, well, Sigma's going to go away, or we're going to sue them and it's going to go away. It is not going away, because even if you take Sigma out of the picture, you need groundwater sustainability to have a future in agriculture. And then I think that a lot of the things that the state has done to help us move some of these forward, we appreciate, and I know they're beginning to start to codify them a little bit more, some streamlining and other things. So those are all going to help in funding, but we understand the funding window right now is closing for the state. But for those of us that play in the federal realm, the federal government is now stepping in where the state is exiting. So for those of you that can have access to Bureau Reclamation funds or the new Inflation Reduction Act funds, start tracking those closely.
Jenny, what's the state's plan? What can be done to expand this and receive this recharge at scale?
Yeah, I think there's a few things, and it's an all hands on deck approach that understanding where do we put water? Where are the best places to recharge for multiple benefits? So we've got our Sustainable Groundwater Management Office that is doing a lot of basin characterization, flyovers, surveying electromagnetic resistivity of groundwater basins to kind of see where do we have these fast paths to recharge, and how can we better understand our basins and prioritize locations for recharge. So having really good basin information is critical to help determining where are those best places to put water when it's available. I think from what incentivizes money, credits. So having that additional funding, and I think that's where multi-benefit thinking is a tool and not a hindrance. We're not layering on more requirements, but if you're thinking about a recharge project, how can you add pollinator benefits like Christine has done? How can you add that flood risk reduction? How can you add others, that soil health, to bring other partners to the table, other funding sources, looking at restoration funding or flood funding or soil health funding. There's different pots to be able to take advantage of opportunities when they're available by layering on that multi-benefit hat, and really the state supporting recharge programs at a district or basin scale, and supporting planning at that scale. One of the other things that we're working on is a lot of conversations around managed aquifer recharge. People are picturing on farm. We talk about on farm a lot. There's a lot of potential there, but DWR and local partners in the Pajaro, Upper San Joaquin, Cosumnes watersheds, we've been looking at opportunities at floodplain restoration. So typically people don't think of land adjacent to a river as good recharge options, but they are. There's a lot of land, there's a lot of opportunity to get multi-benefit projects adjacent to the river that get inundated more often to promote habitat and recharge. We have a lot of losing streams in California, so that water is moving towards recharge areas where aquifers are depleted, and having those types of benefits and getting that risk reduction, that recreation, being able to align a lot of local and state priorities in that floodplain space. So there's a lot of opportunity to really think differently and creatively, and having these mosaic of recharge projects and recharge lands than just one size fits all solutions.
Great. One final question before we move over to the panelists is, how can nonprofit organizations like Sustainable Conservation further support these needs at the farmer level, at the district level, or at the state level? There's a number of nonprofits besides ourselves that are working in this space. And what's the best way that we can support all of you or advance this approach? Anybody want to jump on that?
I say you can really help us with the education part of it, because I'm really busy doing a lot of farming work. I mean, I love doing this kind of stuff. But I can't take it on as a full-time job, but it really needs to be a full-time job to get the message out there. And I'm not just talking about growers educating, but also educating the public at large, and especially policymakers, and how to direct policy and legislation, to make it happen, make it possible on a large scale.
Yeah.
I think Christine's spot on. And we've enjoyed the partnership and working with sustainable folks like Sustainable Conservation. And Christine's right, like even as an irrigation district, everybody thinks irrigation district, groundwater sustainability agency, as if they're organizations. And I look behind me, I go, wait, there's nobody behind me. So you're looking at it, right? And so the good work that comes out of the people helping us understand this, promote this, and then the carrying of the positive message, or the understanding that this is all difficult, it's all not perfect, but the effort is worth it. And for, carrying that message for us helps us promote the activity. A lot of times in this industry or even in the Central Valley, everything is seen so negatively, and I'll be very honest with agriculture is not even seen statewide as a positive thing, right? So we have an uphill battle to begin with, and having support and positive messaging and information and knowledge, that's how we're going to get to sustainability.
Yeah, and I would just add, sustainable conservation and other nonprofits have really been instrumental, critical in increasing, promoting recharge across the state. I think, nonprofits, sustainable conservation have been, you have this ability to work across organizations and at different scales, and work directly with growers like Christine to implement on-farm recharge projects, and then work up to policymakers and bring what you're learning to that higher level to inform state policy and identify opportunities for state alignment. So I think nonprofits are uniquely situated to kind of be those connectors, those networkers, and of course, sustainable conservation has been critical in supporting the Floodmar network and being part of the conversation and trying to bring together a larger community that's looking at expanding recharge Floodmar projects throughout the state.
Thank you. That's great. Certainly, that's our intention, is to keep working along all those lines you all have mentioned. So that's great. We now have about 20 minutes to take questions from the audience. And we've got quite a few already in the question and answer section of Zoom here. I'm just going to go through some of these. Some may have already been answered. The first one, Jenny, I think you've touched on, was a question about whether USGS or NASA have the whole state map for suitable groundwater recharge areas. And you talked about the flyover electromagnetic imaging that the Department of Water Resources is doing. And I know at Sustainable Conservation, we've been using USGS data, which has not been at that similar granularity of detail. So anything you want to say more about the mapping effort at the department?
I think, yeah, each layer of information is just providing a better understanding at different scales. Our AEM, our airborne electromagnetic surveys, are still a pretty broad scale, but provide a snapshot underground of what does the soil profile look like. Where are more gravelly soils, more sandy soils? We've got other technologies that we want to kind of infill that airborne electromagnetic survey information with, and that's a towable, a floatable, and I think as you're getting down to more project scale understanding, you need to bring down these lower scale technologies to really identify those best opportunities for recharge, and knowing where that water's going. What kind of benefits are you going to achieve by recharging in this area, or what kind of potential impacts? We haven't talked about impacts and risks a little much, but those are certainly a consideration too. So you need as much information at the scale that's appropriate to make good decisions, formulate projects that provide the objectives that you're looking for.
Erin, you were one of the early testers of that aerial electromagnetic imaging with Stanford University, and have some of the totem, the smaller devices. How have those affected your decision making?
I don't know why I thought this topic would come up, but I do actually have slides on it. So let me just show you really quick. So we have used the SkyTem system to identify aquifer systems at large scale. The system sees down 1,300 to 1,500 feet. So we get a regional scale of where our aquifer systems are at, and we can make decisions better. And so we learned our Corcoran clay was not where we thought it was. It was further to the west. We learned that our eastern slope was steeper, and that our aquifers on the east were shallower. So that information was great on a regional scale, but we, as was pointed out, you're trying to find recharge locations, and it didn't have that granularity. So we purchased a totem unit And then we can get really detailed images like these. So this sort of data and information, while it comes at a cost, you're investing millions into your project. So you want to make sure you put it in the right place because you only have 4 years to get that done. So it's invaluable to us.
Great.
And also when you're working with growers, no one knows the land better. They know where water ponds, they know where it infiltrates quickly. And so, we've got information to help make decisions at different scales. And then that level of granularity becomes important when you're looking for like what corner of this parcel to inundate, or what you're going to formulate your project. So Christine probably can talk about how she knows on her property where the best recharge places are, just from observation and experience.
Absolutely. I mean, one of our orchards is perfect for it because it's sandy, the other is not. And I just want to say that actually within just if you go very granular, so I'm in the Blue Diamond Co-op, within that co-op, they're actually looking at over all their growers and acreage, what soils are most appropriate for recharge. And so that they have an idea of going forward into the future, what sustainability looks like for the Blue Diamond Growers Co-op, when it comes to water and our water usage and, the ability to do recharge.
Got a number of questions sort of related to the right location around the Corcoran clay. And for those that aren't familiar with the Corcoran clay that Erin just mentioned, this is a old lake bottom impervious layer of clays that impedes that groundwater or surface water moving into some of the aquifers below that. Erin, there's a question, this is about Fresno, Tulare, or Kern region. The recharge you're doing is oftentimes above the Corcoran clay, but the pumping may be coming from below that layer. How is that being looked at? Are there plans to address deep aquifer overpumping or deep aquifer, or ways to improve deep aquifer recharge?
Yes, and yes, and yes. It's a very complicated matrix of where you put the water, where you get it from. But if you think about it, we're not completely underneath the clay. So many of our what we call our workhorse recharge basins are east of the clay. So we are updating our new model and incorporating the new Corcoran clay location and depth that we've gotten through our SkyTem. So we're working on that evaluation now, but we will be managing recharge and pumping above and below the Corcoran clay. That being said, we are evaluating options like aquifer storage and recovery projects that put water in under the clay, and or management actions that stop pumping below the clay and increase surface water in those areas. Then, as the groundwater levels improve in that area, they, to a certain extent, can either modify their deep wells to come back up into the shallow or re-drill into the shallow. So we're not quite there yet.
Jenny touched on some of the potential impacts, and one that has been raised is with applying all of this fresh water, stormwater on top of soils, presuming most of it's snow melt and clean water, the risk of flushing accumulated nutrients and pesticides down into the aquifer has been raised especially by community groups whose drinking water wells are already in many places impaired and not drinkable. What are all of your thoughts on this risk and potential benefit of recharge to water quality?
I've definitely thought about that, and I've actually taken some steps to deal with it going forward. I've done a fair amount of reading on the use of biochar amendments to soil, because they adsorb, not absorb, and they bind to things like nitrates. So I'm looking at adding those to my soil to actually prevent leaching.
That discussion in our SGMA, or Sustainable Groundwater Management Act discussions when we were developing our plan, was probably the most controversial and the most hard to get over, but it was a tipping point where even our communities recognize that what is the water quality concern in a dry well? There is none, number one. And number two, where's the clean water in our region? There is none. So are we over analyzing a problem that we have to, work with? But at the same time, we know we can achieve groundwater recharge. So, and even some of our communities said our groundwater quality might have to get worse before it gets better, right? And so you might have to get that water out, use it, treat it, and put it back. And so what we're hopeful for, and that's what our Okieville Recharge Basin project is to evaluate, that is what water quality and what water quantity benefits come from groundwater recharge for a disadvantaged community. So we have a testing protocol and measurement protocol as we begin recharging, and we're about 3/4 of a mile away. So we can preemptively stop the recharge or intercept it prior if there's a problem headed towards the community.
Yeah, we've also, thought about, two other strategies, avoidance and dilution. So when you're looking at recharge areas, some areas just aren't good candidates for recharge. If there's legacy contamination, there's areas you want to avoid. But if there are opportunities to bring a lot of volume, to recharge an area often and with a lot of flushing and really, flush the soil column and, get more water, cleaner water into the aquifer and get that benefit of dilution. There are some opportunities, you want to really look at that volume, like making sure that you can recharge an area that might have, legacy nitrates or other concerns, and really making sure that, as Aaron said, you might see an impact to water quality to start, but over time, you might get that dilution factor. So it's definitely a consideration when targeting recharge areas. Think about potential impacts to water quality.
And I'll just put a plug in that on Sustainable Conservation's website, we've developed a considerations document that was developed in partnership with a lot of the community NGOs around where and when those risk tolerances should be thought about. As you said, Jenny, if there's an area with good drinking water quality now, applying a lot of water and flushing nutrients could worsen that water quality. Maybe we don't want to do it there. It may be sort of counterintuitive. It's the place where it's worse right now. Maybe the recharge is the best approach because of the dilution. But assessing that and thinking about the different variables that go into it can help with thinking about the suitable sites.
Yeah, and Danielle, a little bit of a tangent, because we haven't talked about, which I always think is interesting as well, is the surface water quality. I think a lot of people picture, clean snow melts coming down the water, or coming down the mountains, and we're recharging with clear water. Aaron can talk better to anyone that he was managing chocolate milk this year. Like, these are flood flows that can be, churning up lots of sediment and carrying a lot of debris. And it's really up to the local district of their risk tolerance for managing that kind of water and when they want to take water when it's available, and if the water is more important than the O&M afterwards. And so, there is another water quality consideration on that surface water side.
Yeah, do you want to take that water or not? I said, we're taking that water. And when we shut the basins off, we went into our workhorse basins and we had 5/8 of an inch of sediment at the bottom. That was a crust. And we ran some cone tests around it. It is restricting flow. I can't remember my numbers perfectly, but so we are spending thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to get that sediment out. We're not disking it. We're physically picking it up and getting it out.
There was another question around the need for additional surface reservoirs for flood control. Jenny, can you talk a little bit about, as the department is analyzing flood control aspects, what is the role for reservoirs, both existing and new?
Yeah, reservoirs play a huge role in being able to manage large volumes of water at any given time. If it's snow melt, if it's precipitation, if it's both. A lot of our rim reservoirs are multi-purpose, and so they have a flood control space that they manage for every season, and there's an amount of space that varies with depending if you're in November or December or January. You know, you want that peak storage when you need it most. And one of the most promising strategies for groundwater recharge and flood risk reduction is reservoir reoperation, and looking at how you might be able to evacuate space and additional space in the reservoir ahead of the flood season, move that former surface storage into ground, so you're storing water underground, increasing that flood control space, and having that deeper pool to be able to take more water ahead of the season or with forecasts. So there's a lot of opportunity with forecast informed reservoir operations, because our forecasts are just getting better and better. And this year, a lot of investment was made at the state level and different levels of better understanding snowpack, better being able to do another flight survey of understanding the water content in our snowpack and how that's going to melt, having lots of good gauges on our system to be able to understand and forecast with precipitation, with snow melt, how do we manage our surface storage. And with those forecasts getting better and better, we're getting more and more certainty that a week out, 5 days out, we can see the storm coming. We have a good idea of where it's going to make landfall. Let's make some releases, spread it out, sink it in ahead of the event, and see some flood reduction benefit. I think we've got a lot of good, storage capacity for floodwater in the system right now. It is really managing that space conjunctively with groundwater that I think we could see some significant benefits, and then making sure in our system we have the adequate conveyance and diversion to get that water off.
I just wanted to add to that conversation, everything that Jenny, we've practiced, it does work. It really works. And, but I wanted to add to that conversation, the best actually form of groundwater recharge is in lieu groundwater recharge, because you're not going to touch the groundwater. So that surface water is critical. If you can reoperate it to maximize it for irrigation use, that's your best recharge, because you're not going to touch it and it's already down there. You don't need to wait for the cycle time to go down. You don't have the water quality concerns, all those things. I do believe the state has intentions of statewide reservoir. You see sites, you see the other projects. I think for us south of the San Joaquin, it's a little bit more challenging. And so I encourage folks to look more creatively. There are options out there for small surface water storage. Like we're doing, we're reclaiming old mining operations and filling them up with water. There are just holes in the ground that have been left there. So look for those, because you can create in lieu projects with that surface water storage.
Thank you.
Can I amend also, Daniel? I'm sorry.
We just have a few minutes left
here.
here. We're actually come to the end of our time. Just real briefly there, Jenny, do you want to just wrap that thought up?
Oh yeah, sorry. I just wanted to also get people thinking about transitory temporary storage. Like it doesn't have to be a big reservoir to make an impact on flood risk reduction. Land uses that are compatible with seasonal flooding, like row crops, multi-benefit recharge basins. So think about, an area like Orange County, Prado Dam is a seasonal dam. There isn't water there all the time. It's only there when they need the flood control storage. So even on smaller scales, but lots of them of, temporary seasonal storage, I think has a lot of benefit for recharge and flood risk reduction.
Well, I know we could go on, and the three of us have gone on for hours, each of us in conversations. So I hope that our audience, got a sense of the kinds of things that everyone is thinking about right now for multi-benefit recharge. I really want to thank you each, Erin, Christine, and Jenny, for being with us today, for sharing your wisdom. We really appreciate our partnerships with you. You are the ones that help us find the stories and tell the stories and make sure others learn from you. And thank you to all of you who participated and tuned in today. We hope you enjoyed being privy to this kind of conversation. The next webinar in this series will be announced soon. The specifics of it, but the November 7th is when it will occur, and it's going to focus on habitat and floodplain restoration. So more about the topic that Jenny started to mention, and how those restored floodplains can help revive our water resources for communities and wildlife. And I think at this point, if you just wanted to let you know, if you'd like to follow Sustainable Conservation's work, please find us on social media, subscribe to our email list, or consider a donation. All new and increased donations right now are currently being matched dollar for dollar. So it's a great time to support us by visiting us at suscon.org/give or scanning the QR code on your screen. And I'm just really proud to be able to work with folks like our panelists to help advance these ideas with all of your support. And I think together we're really starting to have an impact. This year has really demonstrated that we can change the way that California manages its water. So hope to see you again on November 7th, and have a wonderful day. Thank you all.